Sometimes a movie will open with a passage or quote, sometimes delivered by a narrator, but usually written on the screen as a title card. Edmund Elias Marriage's 1989 film Begotten has two. The purpose of these title cards, when they are used, is twofold. They immediately set a tone for the audience, but more importantly, they advise the viewer on the thematic lens through which they should view the contents of the movie. Like a TV crew member holding up a cue card and instructing the live studio audience when to laugh or gasp, a movie that begins with a quote or passage is instructing the audience on how they should think and feel while watching. If you're watching a movie and you don't understand the point or the meaning, just think back to the cue card at the start. It told you to feel miserable, remember? These are the opening passages from Begotten. The first tells the audience that matter and the passage of time is the true universal language. Photographers and diary makers, by recording moments and freezing them in time, are stuck forever in their present, and language bearers, which means everyone on Earth, are included in this sentiment. As a film director and a human being, Marriage is both a photographer and a language bearer, and thus the sentiment applies to him too. Marriage seems to acknowledge that the human experience is limited by default, and that the true language of the universe is beyond human comprehension. Language contains our meaning, and the true language, the true meaning, is the matter of the universe itself. What I take from the opening passage is that, at least in the context of this movie, and at most in Marriage's worldview, God is to be understood as the matter of the universe and the passage of time. The second passage supports this, describing life as flesh on bone, convulsing above the ground. Man is just another animal and another product of the universe. This sounds like an incredibly cynical and hopeless worldview, but Marriage has stated in interviews that he believes in the continuity of consciousness in some form. He says, "I don't think the body dying means it's over, it just means there's a transformation taking place." Even after physical death, Marriage believes life doesn't end, and thus his statement that life is flesh on bone becomes a spiritual philosophy describing the body as merely a vessel for the human spirit, not the entirety of a human's existence. Even the Bible agrees. Genesis 2:7 reads, "The Lord God formed a man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being." The previous passage makes sense now. The matter of the universe and the essence of the human soul are the things that will endure across time, not the written or spoken records humans make. That's a lot to take in during the first 42 seconds of a movie, and a lot to remember for the remaining 72 minutes. If matter and the passage of time are the true language, then that explains why the movie has no spoken dialogue. It doesn't need any to convey its philosophy. If man is flesh on bone and the physical body is not the essence of human existence, only the vessel for it, then the humiliating and degrading ways in which characters are treated within the film's narrative are nothing more than the wheels of the universe turning dispassionately. Dispassionately is the key word there. Like the universe according to Friedrich Nietzsche, Begotten as a piece of art has no meaning but that which we, the audience, assign to it. Nietzsche is known for declaring that God is dead and we have killed him, but Nietzsche was more specifically referring to the notion of a collectively accepted objective truth, and not the literal creator of all things. As the world had become scientifically enlightened, so too had the world begun to move away from the assumed objective truth of Christianity, and thus God, as a concept, was dead. Since God's function in Nietzsche's eyes was to provide humans with a sense of meaning for their lives, a world in which God is dead is a world in which human life has no meaning, that is, no objective and universal meaning. No meaning that people should collectively assume to be true. Begotten as a piece of art is nihilistic. That's not me necessarily assuming that Marriage is a nihilist, but that the film as art reflects that philosophy. The movie begins with God killing himself. That's the character's credited name, by the way. And so in this movie, it isn't literally humans that killed him. It could be assumed that God killing himself at the start of the movie is meant to personify or visually portray Nietzsche's statement, but I don't think this is the case, functionally speaking. It's a nice piece of irony, but I think the function of God's death in Begotten instead reflects the movie's artistic approach, rather than its philosophical approach. Antonin Artaud was a French dramatist, essayist and theatre director who wrote in The Theatre and Its Double that the language of theatre should be the dramatic and sensual experience given to the audience, and not necessarily literal language. His notion of a theatre of cruelty has been described as a way of attacking the audience, waking them from their complacency and their assumptions of what theatre should be. It's worth noting at this point that Marriage's background was in theatre, and that Begotten had first been conceived as a theatre production, following Artaud's artistic philosophy. Deciding instead to adapt Begotten as a film, Marriage carried over that most important notion of cruel theatre, making an effort to assault the audience and subvert their comfortable expectations of what films should be. Looking at Begotten as a subversion of cinematic conventions and an assault on its audience, it's easy to see how this movie's influences could include the likes of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Seven Samurai, Un Chien Andalou, and Battleship Potemkin. All four are considered groundbreaking for their times. Dr. Caligari is often cited as the first horror movie ever, and used the German expressionist art style to discomfort and confuse its audience. Un Chien Andalou's famous eyeball-slicing scene is a great example of how that surrealist short film assaulted its audience in unconventional ways, using association tricks and editing to create horror. The influential Soviet film Battleship Potemkin featured an innovative montage sequence portraying a massacre, again assaulting the audience with an act of mass violence. And the Japanese classic Seven Samurai basically invented the ensemble adventure genre, single-handedly creating a number of the conventions that we see in movies to this day. Other potential influences include the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eraserhead, both of which use uncomfortable sounds and visuals to horrify the audience. So in a movie with no dialogue and only two vague title cards, how can we discern a possible meaning? As mentioned before, the movie reflects nihilism in the sense that it has no objective meaning, only the meaning which the audience assigns to it. It would be oversimplistic, I think, to say that Begotten is only about man destroying nature, only an allegory for creation, only a retelling of parts of the Bible, or that Mother Earth and the Son of Earth are only the Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ. Begotten marries numerous religions, myths, and philosophies into a sort of monomyth, compounding story elements from the Bible, philosophical cues from Nietzsche, artistic attitudes from Artaud, and directors like Akira Kurosawa, Luis Buñuel, and Sergei Eisenstein, and visual cues from Greek and Roman mythology. Religious and mythological stories tend to be brutal, even the Bible, which we teach to our children, and that brutality might be the most important cue Begotten takes from creation mythology. The fact that the movie takes place in an unspecified place and time is important too. There are basically no clues as to where or when this movie is set. For all we know, it could be set in the present day, or on Mars, or in another dimension, or in hell itself. This timeless and placeless nature, coupled with the palpable absence of dialogue, makes it impossible for the viewer to establish a frame of reference or comparison, and thus we resort to the symbols and archetypes in our unconscious mind to make assumptions about what we're seeing. A person living in a Christian or westernized country might assume this was a retelling of the Bible, but if we could show this film to a person living in ancient Greece, they would probably make connections with Zeus and figures like Hercules. Since the first character we meet is credited as God, it's fair to assume that he is the creator, whether you call that creator God, Allah, Zeus, or the universe itself. Notice, however, that when we meet him, he's already in a universe. At this point, God has already created the world, and killing himself is his final act of creation, as it leads to the birth of the character credited as Mother Earth. Born from the carcass of God, Mother Earth inseminates herself with his seed by desecrating his dead body. It's the kind of thing you could imagine the Greek gods doing to each other. After placing God in a coffin and falling pregnant, Mother Earth gives birth to the character credited as Son of Earth, Flesh on Bone, whom she abandons to face the wilderness alone. Despite the implications of his name, that he is the first human, the son is actually seized by other humans, who salvage his organs and burn him. The world of Begotten is so passive that it doesn't even need God to create it, and it already has humans in it when the first man is born. So is the Son of Earth the first man, basically Adam from the Bible, or is he the Son of God, basically Jesus? If we're to assume that he represents Jesus, then it would be easy to assume that the pilgrims that kill him represent the people who crucified Jesus. I propose that if he does represent Jesus, and once again I don't personally believe he represents any one single character, then perhaps the pilgrims are Jesus' disciples, whom Jesus taught to symbolically drink his blood and eat his flesh. The pilgrims do indeed salvage the son's organs before disposing of him. By the end of the movie, when Mother Earth and the son have been buried and become one with the soil, flowers begin to bloom over their graves. In my opinion, this is the continuity of consciousness that Marriage has described in interviews, as the innocence of the characters and the flesh of their bodies is transformed into new life. The death of their physical bodies is not the end for them. Even the death of God himself brings forth more new life, and while the sun is shown setting on the horizon multiple times during the movie, Marriage also shows us the sun rising. I think at this point I've squeezed everything I can out of this film. The thematic depth and symbolism it offers is its greatest asset, and unfortunately it's far more interesting to talk about than to actually watch. As always, if you've sat through the whole video, I very much appreciate it. Do consider subscribing for more reviews and analysis.